Hello, everybody. Matthew Horsley here, buyer for Bordeaux at the Wine Society, and today I'm doing a recording for those who have purchased our Bordeaux tasting packs, which have been offered online. They should still be available, and we are recording this so we keep it online and allow you to continue to buy those tasting packs to try a number of really exciting, delicious red Bordeaux from around the region. We've been lucky enough to gain some financial support in order to offer a discount not only on this tasting pack, but also on a case of 6 wines, number of which are available in the tasting pack, which I'll be tasting in this video, but also another couple of wines, a white and a Sauterne as well, which is also available online at the moment. It's the value Bordeaux case. There's also a case saving available on that, and it's absolutely cracking value. So I do highly encourage you to check that out. The hope really was, as the new Bordeaux buyer, to help encourage those potentially new to the region to discover a few of the new wines, a few of the regions, a few of the styles, just to get a grip with what is arguably the world's most famous wine region. But since I took over, I've been quite keen to show that whilst Bordeaux for many people might seem as the kind of first mountain to climb when it comes to learning about wine, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's actually, I think, quite an easy region to get your head around. There aren't that many great varieties. And whilst there are multiple regions, I think stylistically there can be quite a lot of similarities that you can draw. And I also think that a lot of the areas, a lot of the regions, a lot of the sub-appellations have their own really distinct identity. So tasting in a tasting pack like this can be a really good way to see where you particularly enjoy to drink from in Bordeaux. And of course, the great thing about Bordeaux is that you can access Bordeaux at almost any price point, whether it's £8.95 or £89 or £189. There is fantastic value to be had from across the region. And it's going to be my honour, hopefully, for a number of years to be buying the wines of Bordeaux for the Wine Society for you to enjoy. I'm recording this at home on my own, so hopefully I don't have any technical difficulties. I do have the wines here, which I'm going to be tasting. I do have a bit of a presentation, which really just shows the wines and a map, which I'm going to get up now, so it's not just me that you're looking at. Bear with me just a second. Let's start that slideshow. Okay, so let's crack straight on. So as I mentioned, these are all from the tasting pack. I'm pretty sure they're in the number or order that I'm tasting here, but I've got the wines on the screen so you can taste along just to make sure that you are keeping up and tasting the same wine as me. So the first wine is our Generation Series Haut-Médoc, which is from 2019, which is a really fantastic vintage in Bordeaux. The wines are quite powerful, they're quite tannic, they're quite structural, they perhaps have less of the flesh and weight of perhaps 2020 and 2022, but they do really make very enjoyable drinking. This is from Château, who we have worked with for a number of years. We're their biggest customer in the world, and so it's an absolute pleasure for them to have done an own label wine for us to celebrate our 150th anniversary in 2024. Now, they are located just outside the village of Pessac, which is basically right in between Saint-Julien and Margaux, the two famous Bordeaux areas. And this is a blend, as the screen there says, 55% Cabernet Sauvignon and 45% Merlot. Now, this is an exclusive blend that my predecessor, Tim Sykes, put together for the Wine Society, specifically for this year. And I think it really sums up what makes Haut-Médoc great. It's very approachable, but there's lots of complexity there if you want to be looking for it. I mean, I get asked a lot kind of what my house red wine is at the moment, and I probably drink more of this than anything else at the moment, which is absolutely fantastic. Another great thing is that 80% of the wine has spent a year in French oak, of which 30% was new, and so it gives lots of kind of voluptuous, spicy, savoury notes. I'm just going to have a smell. I'm going to get up the map as well, so you can have a look. I'm going to try and get up the map as much as I can throughout this tasting, so you can really get a feel of the area. Let's share this. Great. I've zoomed in a little bit, otherwise it's quite difficult to see. But the Haut-Médoc is basically this kind of red area here on the left. It's what's kind of famously known, this red area, as the left bank. And it almost kind of surrounds the areas of Saint-Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint-Julien, and then borders Margaux just to the south. And Beaumont is basically right in between that small section between Saint-Julien and Margaux. So it's really ideally situated. And interestingly, it's pretty much a single vineyard estate. It's got about 100 hectares, but it's one of the largest in Bordeaux. So it means that we can do fantastic volumes and offer really great value. So this is 14.95, which when you compare it to their own and a Grand Vin, which is about £16, I think it offers really fantastic value. So it's nice and perfumed, really fresh, nice and spicy, lots of bramble fruit, dark cherry, red currants. And I'm hoping, like all really great Haut-Médocs, there should be a lovely fine tannin structure and nice juicy fruit. Yeah, exactly that. It's got a lovely, almost honeyed character to it. Really fine tannins that are really nice and ripe, but they do add structure. And whilst we did produce this specifically for 1/50th, I do think this is going to get better with age. So, if you've got a few in your cellar or you're considering buying, then don't worry too much. I think this is going to be fantastic for another 3 or 4 years without a problem. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Also, alcohol, I suppose, is 13.5, which is fairly standard for 19 and Haut-Médoc. Delicious. Need some red meat. The tannins are still a little bit firm, I think, for 19. So something to eat alongside would be good. So the next wine, whilst we're on the map, I'll show you where we're going to be for the next wine. So it's another wine from our Generation series. It's the Castillon Côte de Bordeaux, which is over here on the right-hand side, Côte de Castillon. And this is produced by Château de Pitre, who I'm sure if you've been to Wine Society events in the past, you may have met Jean de Boyne, who is very tall, big beard. I always think he looks a little bit like Jason Momoa, if you've seen any of the Aquaman films, which I actually haven't, but I know him as an actor. And he's great fun. He's absolutely hilarious. And the Château de Pitre is definitely one of the most picturesque chateau in all of Bordeaux. It's this towering, beautiful, large property. You can stay there as well, and there's just a wonderful team. The wine's made by a lady called Nina Mitreville, who, if you know, Tertre Berth, which is one of the top kind of right bank properties. It's the daughter of the owner, and she's making some really wonderful wines at Château de Pitre. In terms of the wine itself, let's just get up the data sheet for you. Here we go. So it's also, as I said, part of our Generation series. And again, it is an exclusive blend for the Wine Society. This is basically on a par, if not a slightly improved version of their Madame de Pitre, which is their top wine. And again, I think it offers fantastic value for money. It, compared to the Haut-Médoc on the left bank, this is majority Merlot. And so in terms of the blend itself, it is 65% Merlot, 30% Cabernet Franc, and 5% Malbec. So we're not seeing any Cabernet Sauvignon, which we will have seen on the left bank. The right bank is very much more a Merlot-dominated area, and you start to see Cabernet Franc, which offers a lovely perfume and a little bit of structure. And for this example anyway, a little bit of Malbec, which adds lovely spice. But the Merlot hopefully should add lovely voluptuousness to the wine. It should soften the tannins, and it should give a much broader, softer, rounder mouthfeel. And in terms of fruit profile, typically on the right bank where you've got more Merlot, you're looking towards a more red fruited character, a nice plummy, red fruited, almost kind of dark strawberry character. Another fantastic thing about Château de Pitre is that they have extremely old vines for an area which historically offers wines at pretty good value. And so the Merlot is all planted between 1970 and 1974, which is incredible. Cabernet Franc between 1964 and 1985, and the Malbec was planted in 1985. And typically, older vines will give lower yields, which you'd think normally would make the wines a bit more expensive. Another reason why Château de Pitre is such great value. And they typically give a bit more weight, a bit more concentration, perhaps a little bit more structure, and a little bit more flavor complexity as well. So fingers crossed we should be getting that in this wine. 5% of the wine was aged in new French oak barrels, and all the Merlot was aged in oak, whereas the Cabernet Franc and the Malbec was fermented in stainless steel and matured in stainless steel before blending. Firstly, it shows much more richness, more body than the Haut-Médoc, which I suppose is only natural. But also 2020 is perhaps a richer, warmer, more voluptuous vintage. And so you're getting a little bit of added concentration with that and a little bit of the softer tannins as a result. And I think it's showing the oak a lot more, despite there only being 5% new oak compared to 30% new oak. I'm getting a lot more kind of nutmeg, cinnamon, almost kind of Christmas spices on this wine. I think perhaps the Merlot almost absorbs the oak just that little bit more than the Cabernet does in the previous wine, which I think is delicious now. I really do think this wine is going to be better, in a year, maybe even 2 years. But I think after opening and decanting perhaps for an hour, I've literally just opened this and it's already very showy, really voluptuous. But I think it'll maybe just get a little bit more subtle and a bit more nuanced after a little bit more time in the glass. Lovely. So yeah, if you're looking for that rich, spicy, supple, then Côtes de Castillon can be a really nice area to look into. Right, let's go on to our next wine. So the next wine is I'm just trying to move my screen. Here we go. So the next wine is our anniversary Margaux. So this was a range of wines that we started buying as a team of buyers about 10 years ago, actually. And the aim was that at the Wine Society, we're very lucky to be able to purchase wine and store it at our own cellars and wait for that wine to age. I think we all know that Bordeaux naturally ages fantastically well, mainly because of that wonderful tannin structure and lovely fresh acid from the maritime climate. And so it's always been a big belief at the Wine Society that we should be able to age wine for our members and then release the wines when they are fully mature. And in order to really hone in on this key USP for the Wine Society was to do a range of wines which specifically did that. And so for the red wines, the requirement was that they needed to be A, exclusive to the Wine Society, and B, be able to be aged at the Wine Society for at least 5 years for the red wines before they were released, and then obviously releasing at a fantastic price. I mean, this is produced for us by the Seychelles family at Anglais, who are a cru bourgeois, but one of the very best. And we've been working with them since around the 70s. The Seychelles family also produce our society's claret, which is our #1 selling Bordeaux, and it's one of our top selling red wines, which is fantastic. It's a delicious wine, lovely unoaked Merlot, which I'm looking forward to blending at the start of 2025 for the first time, which is going to be really exciting. And this is a unique blend for us, which Ben Seychelles, the winemaker at Anglais, allowed us to do, which is extremely exciting, of course. It's from 2015, which is a really strong vintage. Again, I find a little bit like 19, it can be quite firm in its youth. But the great thing here is that Margaux is known for perfume and suppleness. Now we're back on the left bank, so this is just to the south of where Beaumont was based. So it's the most southerly of the kind of four key left bank areas. And historically, there's a little bit more Merlot included in Margaux, and so you often get a little bit more perfume, you get a little bit more voluptuous body, and a little bit more elegant than perhaps Pauillac, which is quite firm, structured, powerful with fragrance, or Saint-Julien, which is a little bit kind of fleshier, a little bit more perfumed, and then Saint-Estèphe, which we're going to go on to in a minute, which is a bit more structured, a bit more herbaceous. So the blend, as you can see there, is 55% Cabernet Sauvignon, again, the left bank, so it's predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon, 37% Merlot, 8% Petit Verdot, and aged for 12 months in French oak, 35% of which was new. And again, naturally, new oak barrels, obviously very expensive. So I think, again, it shows some of that added value that you get from the Beaumont in the Haut-Médoc, 30% new oak. You know, it's a lot of money going towards new oak for a very well priced wine. So yeah, this is £38. It's going to have a sniff. Straight away, you get lovely perfume, and it's a nice, sounds simple, but it's a nice fruity perfume. It's not a perfume that's coming from the wood. It's really coming from the joyous fruit that's in there. It's lovely, and violets and almost kind of rose hips slightly as well. And you can almost smell that it's a ripe, inviting, luscious wine, which I'm hoping it will be on the palate as well. I think it really fills the palate out. It's almost like a really nice, obviously step up from the previous two, but it's almost like a nice combination between the two. You get the tannins that you get from the Haut-Médoc, but you get that lovely fleshy fruit that you want from you get from the Castillon. And I think it's just that lovely addition of the 30% Merlot, just really giving kind of sex appeal and really lovely, gorgeous fruit. I'm going to try it again. It's really nice. Again, whilst this was produced for this year, there's absolutely no rush. It's 2015. I think this could happily age for another 10 years and improve within that time. So again, no rush. Right, let's go on to the next one. So the next wine, I'm going to get the map up quickly, just because I think it's going to be a good idea to show you whereabouts we are. So it's probably one of the lesser known areas, or probably lesser ventured to areas of Bordeaux. So here we're going to be in Pessac, which is part of the Grave area here, this kind of large orange area. So the south of the city of Bordeaux, you're in Pessac-Léognan, and this is a chateau called Château Garde, which is basically just outside the village of Pessac. And typically it's quite a lot of clay, gravelly soil here. But what's really fantastic about Garde is that it's almost effectively a single vineyard, which is fantastic. And it makes really rather benchmark Pessac-Léognan wines. These wines, stylistically, to me, are perhaps the tannins are a little bit more kind of fine and sandy. The wines can be a little bit more perfumed. They can be a little less big, but they can be structured, and typically a little bit more Merlot as well, and should be quite seductive styles of wine. A little bit like Margaux, but perhaps with a slightly different tannin profile. As mentioned, this is just outside the town of Pessac. It's right opposite La Tour Martillac, which is a chateau that a few members may know that make both fantastic red and wonderful white wine. And yeah, predominantly here it's clay with a lot of limestone actually, which makes it really exciting both for red and white. And but the Cabernet is grown on the gravelly soils, which you often get close to the river, which is a key part of Bordeaux. And it's owned by Maison Dort, and so it falls under the Dort category. And it's made by a guy called Frederic Bonnefous, who's just one of the most lovely chaps ever. And we always make a point of going for dinner with him whenever we are in Bordeaux, because he makes wine all over the Bordeaux area. He's got fantastic intel into vintages and characteristics and who's doing what and where's doing well. So it's always important to get all the information we can out of him. Let's just pop back onto the product page. Great. So as it says there, it's a blend of 52% Cabernet Sauvignon, 45% Merlot, and 3% Petit Verdot. And let's have a sniff. It looks fairly youthful in colour. We'd actually been doing, at the time of recording anyway, we did a couple of Bordeaux grower tastings, both in London and we were up in Manchester, where we were showing almost every wine that we had here. I think it was all the wines. And this is from 2016, which is a fantastic vintage, really is one of the best of the last 20 or 30 years. And it's a vintage that we've had a lot of success with Wine Society members because it seems to give the best of both worlds in terms of offering lovely, rich fruit in a more modern style, but also a lovely, savoury, herbaceous, structured, old school claret style, all at fairly moderate alcohols. And so, this is 14, a little bit higher than perhaps more classic style, but certainly early this week it was smelling like I basically called it proper claret. It really did smell wonderful. And it still does here. I think with that extra development, you're starting to get that lovely pencil shaving character, that cigar box, graphite-y character, which I love in Bordeaux. It's one of the really wonderful aromas and flavours that you get from more mature Bordeaux. Again, this is 2016, but it should still be with plenty of life in it. I think our drink dates for this are at least another 10 years, so there's no rush. Yeah, perhaps a bit less fruit weight compared to the Margaux. And you get those really grainy, powdery Pessac tannins, which really do coat the mouth, and they offer a little bit of dry, there's very dry finish. Yeah, that's one thing I'm definitely picking up on the Margaux and the others. There's a really kind of sweet fruited finish, which is really elegant. This is a bit dry, it's a little bit firmer, perhaps shows that it maybe does still need a bit more time. But also as you're getting those more savoury, secondary, tertiary flavour aromas and coming through, then that does mute the fruit a little bit on the palate. Really perfumed on the palate as well. That's really nice. Yeah, again, probably needs food at the moment. It's still a little bit firm on the tannins. But again, I've just opened them. So if I was you, I'd be decanting pretty much all of these wines to drink maybe within an hour of decanting. But I think Garde is a very exciting property. I think it offers really great value, and the wines will age really well, especially in 16. Next up is the Phélan-Ségur, which is sorry, this screen isn't changing. There we go. Which is a Cru Bourgeois Exceptionnel. And this is from the 2018 vintage. So I've really tried to give a full idea of all of the vintages, albeit from different areas. I've tried to give as many vintages as possible here, just to give an idea, because vintage really does matter in Bordeaux. It matters most places, but very much so in Bordeaux with its maritime climate. And so it's a good idea to, if you're new to the area, taste with vintage in mind, area in mind, producer in mind, so that you can get to grips with perhaps what style of vintage you like. 18's quite a warm vintage. Thankfully, there was some rains in early September, which saved the vines going into too much hydric stress or being impacted too much by drought. And here we're in Saint-Estèphe, and so again, I'm sorry, this isn't the most efficient way of showing maps, but I couldn't find a way of including it in the actual presentation. So here we're going back up into the left bank, up into the Haut-Médoc, and we're here in Saint-Estèphe, which is the most northerly of the key appellations where you'll find the kind of most of the Grand Cru Classés. And so Saint-Estèphe up here, as you imagine, it's one of the cooler areas of Bordeaux, and so the wines can sometimes be a little bit austere, a little bit tannic, a little bit mean, and a little bit herbaceous. But in vintages like 2018, where you get a little bit more warmth, you start to get that lovely balance of the herbaceous character. For me, I like Saint-Estèphe that has a really nice, not quite eucalypt, but a definite herbaceousness to the wines, and an almost kind of woody, stalky freshness on the palate. And 18 is one of those nice vintages where you get a nice bit of balance. You get the richness from the warm vintage, but you also get the freshness from the cooler area. So let's go back to the wine. There we go. So yeah, blend of 57% Cabernet Sauvignon, 43% Merlot, and this, as you can see there, the drink dates technically haven't started yet. We're saying drink from 2026. I think you probably could drink it now, but I think really for best results, you want to wait a couple more years. You know, it's still a fairly big, rich primary wine. If you were drinking it now, definitely decant for an hour or two. But I think Phélan-Ségur are a property that's very much on the up. I think they're making some really exciting wines at fairly reasonable prices. It's run by a lovely lady called Véronique Dos, who is just fantastic. She's really delightful, and it's a wonderfully situated property. So it's basically just between Montrose, which is second growth, and Phélan-Ségur, and it's got a wonderful view of the river. And a lot of people often say that, particularly in tricky vintages, if you can see the river, then you're in a good spot, because the mediating effects of that river and the more gravelly soils that you're going to get around there will help with drainage in wet vintages like 24, but also mediate the temperatures in hot vintages like 28, which can be essential. So let's have a smell. Ooh, it definitely smells young. It's almost got a slightly creamy note to it. Definitely probably from oak as well. When I was at the Château a couple of months ago, and I tasted kind of vintages going back to 2012, and the 18 instantly was the one that I remarked and saying clearly had a bit more oak than the others. And Veronique said it definitely does, because this would have been bottled during COVID, and so the ideal bottling time for this would have probably been June, July 2020, and because of COVID, they couldn't get to the cellar, and so they actually left the wine in oak for an extra 3 months more than they normally would, and so I do get a lot more oak on this, which adds lots of nice, rich, kind of premium spice to it, which is really lovely. But perhaps may just take a little bit longer to integrate into the wine. Typically, Phélan-Ségur use about 55% new oak, and that's fairly consistent across all vintages. But this just naturally would have had, you know, maybe 20, 21 months rather than 18, which is fairly certain their standard. So yeah, it does have a slightly, in my glass anyway, a slightly kind of creamy, yogurty, oaky character. God, that's a really gorgeous palette, though. Again, I know £46 is a lot of money for a bottle of wine for a lot of people, but there's a real touch of class, I think, in Phélan-Ségur. I think that oak definitely helps. but it's instantly Bordeaux, and it's almost instantly Saint-Estèphe as well. You get that wonderful herbaceous character on the mid palate, which is really gorgeous. Lovely acidity, big chewy tannins, which are going to take a bit of time to settle. But I think when this wine really hits its stride in maybe 5 years' time, I think it's going to be a real star. And ironically, when tasting at the Chateau, this is probably one of what I thought was one of the weaker vintages of the last 6 or 7. And so really exciting stuff. Mm. I'll be enjoying that very much over the next few days. Yeah, really delicious. Really delicious. And it's an impressive chateau as well. It's big. You can drive along the road basically with the river on your right, and you can see to the left. You can go past Montrose, and then next up is this beautiful big chateau with, just as I mentioned, this fantastic view of the river. So it, you drive past it, and it looks fantastic. It looks the part. Right. On to our final wine. So we're hopping back over onto the right bank now. So we're heading over to Lalande Pomerol, which again, I'll get my map up, sorry. But hopefully, I think maps are fairly essential. It should give you a good idea. So we're now into this kind of deep purpley side here, just north of Saint-Emilion, and with Pomerol there, just up to the northeast of Libourne. Now, Lalande Pomerol, yeah, it's just there, basically just outside Pomerol. And really the difference here is you're moving slightly up from kind of famous limestone plateaus of Saint-Emilion and more into the gravelly clay soils, and so slightly deeper soils. But it's where Merlot can really, really excel. It can gain great weight, and you can provide really lovely wines at very reasonable prices. Now, this is a wine called La Chenade, which is it's produced by the Durantou family. It was founded by Denis Durantou, who sadly passed away a few years ago, and is currently run by his 2 daughters, Constance and Nomi. Nomi's the winemaker, and Constance runs the property and does their marketing, and they're both fantastic. They're extremely driven and make some really exciting, very up-and-coming properties. So this is from Château La Creuselle. This is a small part of their younger vines from La Creuselle, and it's just called La Chenade and not Château La Chenade. And they also own a property in Castillon called Montlandry, which they purchased about 10 to 15 years ago, and have been kind of bringing that up into the public eye, and it's making some really exciting Castillon wines. And also most famously is Église Clinée, which comes under their ownership, which makes unbelievable wines, and they're expensive, but they're worth every penny. And then they're another one of those really up and coming producers on the right bank. So yeah, since taking over, I've wanted to promote these wines. I think they're a wonderful family and make really elegant, generous, ageable, and very affordable wines. Although, never want to tell people the wines are too affordable, but I think these genuinely are. So this is 100% Merlot, £23 a bottle, which I think is a bit of a steal. It's from 2021, which, there's no beating around the bush, is a difficult vintage, but I think when bought well can offer wonderful charm, and the right bank has arguably done quite well, and still offers great richness to the wine. So let's give it a whiff. It smells great. It smells very right bank. It's very rich and voluptuous, and loads of spiced strawberries and almost kind of baked raspberry tart notes, which really just scream Merlot. Slight smokiness on the palate, perhaps a little bit of reduction. which if you have the tasting packs, that may well have blown off in the time that it's gone through the tasting packs. Again, I've just opened this, so I think this will definitely benefit from decanting. I think the reduction to me is slightly muting the palate at the bit, but I think the potential is clearly there. It's got really, I had a bit of an argument with Constance. Well, not really an argument. I think a disagreement on Constance on the tannins. I think we say here grainy tannins, and I think they are quite grainy. I think in 21 they are a little bit grainy, but I don't mind that. I think it adds much wanted structure to the sweet Merlot fruit, and so yeah, and I think they will take a bit of time to soften out. But the great thing is that they're grainy, but they've got a little sweet Merlot fruit jacket around them, which is very appealing. Lovely oaking as well. The oak again is maybe a little bit apparent, but this is a young wine. I tried this wine that's from La Chenade, which is 10, 15 years old, and it's really just hitting its strides there. And I really think this probably does need at least another 5 years to really come into its own. But again, that kind of right bank suppleness is really there to see, and that lovely red fruit profile and perfume. So yeah, there we go. Six wines which I chose for a number of reasons to give an idea of the areas that I think are quite exciting, the producers that we work very well with, as well as a couple of newer ones who I'm keen to push, but also a range of vintages. We've got a number of different vintages here, which is really exciting. I mean, I think we've got 16, 18, 19, 15, 20, 21. So it's a really interesting broad range of vintages. And I hope that's added a nice bit of context to the tasting pack wines. But if you don't have the tasting pack or can't get hold of one, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. There's lots of other wines from these areas. These will hopefully still be available when you're watching these. And I do encourage you to check out our Value for Bordeaux mixed case, of which has a number of these wines in it. I think it's a great way of welcoming yourself to the region, or also if you're familiar to Bordeaux already, grab yourself a bit of a bargain, because there, as I mentioned, we have had some support to offer it on the discount, which is always very welcome. And yeah, and I hope for lots of more tastings like this for you as I continue my journey as buyer for Bordeaux Wine Society. I've still got a lot to learn, but I'm looking forward to learning along the way with all of you. And yeah, I wish you very happy exploration. And as always, any questions, just feel free to drop me an email. And yeah, cheers. Have a good one.